I thought I had found the perfect guy on a dating app, charming, attentive, and everything I had ever wanted. But little did I know that dream would quickly turn into a nightmare. I, 26 female, never thought I'd be that girl. The one in a whirlwind romance that turns into a nightmare. But life has a way of humbling you. It all started on a dating app. You know the story: late night swipes, cheesy pickup lines, and then, somehow, a real connection. That was Ben. He was charming, funny, and had that effortless confidence that made me feel like the luckiest girl alive. Our first date was straight out of a rom-com, a cozy little cafe, nervous laughter melting into easy conversation, and that undeniable spark that made me forget about the world outside. We talked for hours about our favorite books, childhood memories, wild dreams for the future. I left that night with butterflies in my stomach, already hoping for the next date. For the first few months, everything was perfect. He was attentive and affectionate, always texting good morning and good night without fail. He planned thoughtful dates, surprised me with little gifts, nothing extravagant, just small, meaningful gestures that made my heart swell. He listened when I spoke, remembered the tiniest details, made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. I introduced him to my friends, and they adored him. He was effortlessly charming, the kind of guy who could hold a deep conversation 1 minute and crack the perfect joke the next. My family thought he was wonderful, constantly telling me how lucky I was to have found someone like him, and honestly, I believed them. I started picturing a future with him, lazy Sunday mornings together, holidays as a couple, maybe even a life that felt like one of those love stories we all dream about. Then little things started to change. At first, it was small, barely noticeable. Little comments that seemed harmless on the surface but carried an edge I couldn't quite place. "I don't think Emma really likes you, babe. She seems jealous. Why does Jake text you so much? Are you sure he's just a friend? I just think some of your friends don't have your best interests at heart." I brushed it off. After all, wasn't it normal for a boyfriend to be protective? To care about the people in my life? Maybe he was just looking out for me. Maybe I was overthinking it. But then, the subtle suggestions turned into something more. He started questioning all of my friendships, picking apart my social circle piece by piece. If I had plans without him, he'd get moody, distant, making me feel guilty without ever saying the words outright. "I guess I'll just stay home alone, then. I just don't understand why you need to go out so much. You have fun without me so easily, huh?" Soon, the guilt-tripping wasn't enough. He started pushing harder, demanding to know where I was, who I was with, what I was doing constantly. My phone became a leash, vibrating with his messages every few minutes. If I took too long to reply, he'd call, and call, and call. Then came the anger if I didn't answer fast enough. The sweet, charming boyfriend I had fallen for would disappear, replaced by someone I barely recognized. He'd bombard me with texts, asking if I was ignoring him, if I was with someone else. Then, just as suddenly, he'd go silent. Hours would pass with no response. My messages would sit unread, my calls unanswered. I knew what was happening. He was punishing me, teaching me a lesson. And when he finally did respond, it was always the same game. I just needed time to cool off. I guess I care too much. You made me feel like I didn't matter. I hate fighting with you. Why do you keep doing this? It was dizzying, exhausting. I started questioning myself, wondering if I really had done something wrong. Maybe I had been selfish. Maybe I wasn't being considerate enough. Slowly, without even realizing it, I started changing, shrinking myself, dimming my own light just to keep the peace. The man who once made me feel adored now made me feel trapped. I tried to leave more than once. Each time, I would gather my courage, draft the perfect breakup text, or prepare myself for an in-person conversation. And each time, he would break me down before I could even get the words out. He'd show up at my apartment, eyes red with tears, voice shaking as he begged me to stay. I can't live without you. Please, just give me one more chance. I know I messed up, but I love you more than anything. And for a while, I believed him. He'd shower me with affection, extravagant apologies, surprise deliveries of my favorite flowers, handwritten notes promising he'd do better. He'd whisper the right words, hold me like I was the most precious thing in the world. And for a little while, things would get better. The jealousy would fade, the anger would soften, and I'd convince myself that maybe this time would be different. But it never was. The cycle would start again slowly at first, so subtly that I barely noticed the shift until I was back in the same suffocating routine. The possessiveness, the manipulation, the outbursts. Each time, the apologies grew emptier. Each time, the darkness in him seemed to grow. The final straw came on a cold, rainy night. I had finally cut him off, blocked his number, stopped answering his messages, ignored the endless stream of emails and social media DMs. I was done. But he wasn't. At 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of fists slamming against my door. My heart pounded as his voice rang through the hallway, slurred and furious. Open the door. I know you're in there. I froze. My phone was already in my hands, shaking as I dialed 911. You think you can just leave me? You think I'll let you walk away? He kicked the door so hard I thought it would splinter. My neighbor, an older woman from down the hall, must have heard the commotion because she called the cops before I could even finish explaining. By the time they arrived, he was still there, swaying unsteadily, his rage barely held together. They took him away, but not before he managed to leave one last message, a voicemail that still plays in my nightmares. If you think this is over, you're wrong. You'll never escape me. That was it. I knew in my bones that if I stayed, it would only get worse. I didn't just need to leave him. I needed to run. I got lucky. An opportunity opened up at work, a transfer to a branch in another country. A fresh start, thousands of miles away from him. I didn't hesitate. I didn't second guess. I said yes. For 3 weeks, I moved like a ghost through my own life, careful, calculating. I packed only what I needed, sold what I could, left behind everything that tied me to the person I was when I met him. I blocked every number, deleted every account he had access to, changed my email, even switched banks just in case. I told no one except my closest family, swearing them to secrecy. And then, one morning, I boarded a plane and disappeared. It's been a year of relearning how to breathe, how to exist without fear. I'm in a new city, in a new country, slowly rebuilding a life that is mine. I walk unfamiliar streets where no one knows my name, and for the first time in a long time, that feels like freedom, but the scars remain. There are nights I wake up in a cold sweat, convinced I heard his voice outside my window. Days when I flinch at unknown numbers on my phone, my pulse racing until I remind myself, he can't reach me here. Sometimes I still look over my shoulder. But every morning, when I step outside into the crisp air of my new world, I remind myself of one simple truth. I made it out. I survived. And for anyone who needs to hear this, if your gut tells you something is wrong, listen to it. Love should never feel like a prison.